Hi, welcome to these notes. Today, what we're doing is mixed factoring. So with mixed factoring, really it is all the different kinds of factoring put together. It is in a random order, and there might be multi-levels. So let's go ahead and quickly talk about this factoring guide that I have for you. First, always check to see if there's a GCF, okay? So we're going to always do that first, and then we'll go to step 2. Then we're going to look at one of the following different kinds of factoring, see if we can do it. So we have the difference of squares, where you can find the square root of both the first term and the last term. Our basic trinomial factoring, and this is where a equals 1. We have the guess and check trinomial factoring. This is where you have a value for a that is not 1. And then we have the 4 terms, which is factor by grouping. And then again, before we box in our final answer, we'll always see if there's anything else that we can factor again. So for step number 1, what I'm going to go ahead and do is, again, look for a GCF. And a GCF here is going to be 7b. So I'm going to factor out that 7b. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide each term by my factor and put the remainder in parentheses. So 28 divided by 7, starting, we always start with coefficients. I get 4. And then a squared b divided by b, I'm left with a squared. And then negative 63b divided by 7b is going to be a negative 9. And so I'm going to go ahead and look what's left in parentheses. I have 2 terms. I have a minus sign in the middle. And I can find the square root of both the first and last term. So I can go ahead and do one more step of factoring, which is difference of squares. So the square root of 4a squared is 2a. The square root of 9 is 3. And we write our answer with 2 factors. I'm going to go ahead and take a look. Is there anything else that I can factor? And I cannot. So this is my final answer. Now for problem number 2, same thing. We're going to go ahead and look and see if there's a GCF first. And there is a GCF. There's a 3. So I'm going to start by factoring out a 3. Divide each term by your factor. We write the remainder in parentheses. So it's going to be x squared. 9x divided by 3 is 3x. Negative 30 divided by 3 is negative 10. And then I see I have a trinomial, and so my a equals 1. So when my a equals 1, then I'm going to go ahead and take factors of c that would add up to 3. And so with it a negative 10, one has to be positive, the other one has to be negative. So when I remultiply, I get that negative 10. And hopefully you can think of the factors of 5 and negative 2. So we get x plus 5, x minus 2. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Sorry, something caught in my throat. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and see if there's anything else that we can factor. And there's nothing else, so I'm going to go ahead and box this in. There's nothing more that I can do here. Then let's go ahead and take a look at problem number 3. So for problem number 3, I have 4 terms. When I have 4 terms, I can only do factor by grouping. That's how we have to start it. So we're going to start by putting in our grouping symbols. And then look for the GCF of each set of grouping symbols. So my first GCF is going to be x squared. And then I'm left with x plus 2y. My second set of grouping symbols, my GCF here, I'm going to make it a negative 4. So when I divide each term by negative 4, I get that positive x. And then negative 8y divided by negative 4 is that positive 2y. Then my 2 binomials are identical. My next step is I'm going to take each GCF and write it together as a factor. So I have x squared minus 4. And then x plus 2y. We just rewrite the other one time. Take a look, see if there's anything else we can factor. If some of you saw there is one more thing we can factor, good eye. Okay, that's what we need on these kinds of problems. Where I have I can find the square root of both the first and the last term. There's a minus sign in the middle. So this, I can do difference of squares. So x squared minus 4 has one more step. And I'm going to go ahead and find the square root of x squared, which is x. The square root of negative 4 is 2. So I will have x minus 2, x plus 2, and then my other factor binomial will get dropped down. Then we'll see, is there anything else that we can do? And there's nothing else, so I'm going to go ahead and box this in. That's my final answer here. For problem number 4, I take a look at number 4, and there is no GCF. And I see that my first term is not 1. Well, I see it's a trinomial. And then I see that the a is not 1. And so when a is not 1, this is my guess and check. So we start with, you know, that skeleton. And I know I'm going to have a W in here, so I'm going to just plop in my W. And then I take a look at my A and I take a look at my C. And I see that for A, I have two possibilities. I can use the multiples 4 and 1, or I can use the multiples 2 and 2. But if I look at my C, I only have one multiple set. It's going to be 2 and 1. Now, I don't know which one will have the correct sign, but I can go ahead and make 1 2, the other one 1. And I should grab my pencil so I can erase and do my guess and check. So for my guess and check, you know, again, I'm going to work with 4. And, you know, when I remultiply, my goal is to get that b to be 7. And so just kind of thinking, you know, this is a minus. 4 times 2 is 8. So let's just try if I have a 4 here and a 1 there. So that is 8W. This here is 1W. I want a positive 7. So that'll work if I put that in. So let me erase, remultiply, and kind of double check that this all works. So W times 4W is 4W squared. W times negative 1 is negative W. 2 times 4W is 8W. And then 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. When I combine my terms in the middle, I do get what I started with. Okay? So again, it's that guess and check and think about it. And I'm going to go ahead and write in my correct answer. You can have the 1, you don't have to have the 1, whatever is your choice. Let's just double check though for each binomial. There's nothing else I could do. This one, don't get confused, this cannot be difference of squares because that W is not squared. Okay, so I cannot find the perfect square of that first term. So for number 4, this happens to be my final answer. Don't let this throw you off. Sometimes there is no GCF, sometimes there's nothing more we can factor. It's just this. Let's go ahead and try number 5. So for number 5, again, let's look at a GCF. We have a 3x that I can factor out. So I'm going to factor out a 3x. And so 48x to the 5th divided by 3x is going to be 16x to the 4th. And then negative 3x divided by 3x is a negative 1. And then hopefully you see, okay, I have two terms. I can find the square root of the first term and then the last term. There's a minus sign in the middle. So I can do difference of squares on this one. So let's drop down that 3x. The square root of 16x to the 4th is 4x squared minus 1, then 4x squared plus 1. Before I box in my final answer, again, let's double check if there's anything else we can factor. Again, when I see two terms with a minus sign in the middle, I want to always see if I can find the square root of both the first term and the last term. And I can, okay? The square root of 4x squared is 2x. The square root of 1 is 1. So this one can get factored one more time. So let's drop down that 3x. And like I said, the square root of 4x squared is 2x. So I have 2x minus 1, 2x plus 1, and then the 4x squared plus 1 still gets dropped down. And so this is the final answer for number 5. let's try number 6. So on number 6, looking for a GCF. So I see a 3 goes into all of them, and then an XY goes into all of them. So let's factor out 3XY. Divide each term by 3xy, put the remainder in parentheses. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. X squared, y squared divided by xy is xy. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. X divided by x is 1. Y squared divided by y is y. And then 3xy divided by 3xy is plus 1. So when I look inside parentheses, what I'm left with, I do have a trinomial, but my first term is not squared. Okay, so again, if you think back to the guide, you know, ax squared, or just x squared, is what we had to have for the first term. And then we had to have the x for the second term. And I'm not getting that here. What I needed was a y squared with no x. So in this case, there's nothing else that we can do to factor. So I'm going to go ahead and box this one in. And then let's go ahead, we'll try number 8 right now in the video. We'll save number 7 for class. So number 8, let's go ahead and see if there's a GCF. So even though I can find the square root of both, we're going to always still find that GCF. And the GCF of both is 4. So 64 divided by 4 is 16. I keep my m squared. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. But it's going to be negative 1n squared. We just don't write the 1. Then I'm going to see again what I have left over. I have a minus sign. My first and my second term I can find the square root of. So the square root of 16m squared is 4m. The square root of n squared is just n. So I'll have 4m minus n, 4m plus n. And that's it for, well, just quickly double check, see if there's anything else that we can factor, and we cannot. And now, yes, that is it. Let's box that in. And I'm going to call it a day on these notes. We'll finish it up next time I see you in class.